with Arts Garage. In this video, I'll be working on the XRAY GTXE 23 edition, bag 12, the final assembly. So let's get started. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to install the shocks, the front shocks onto the front tower. So we're going to need our front shocks. The front shocks are the ones with the 3 dots and a line. So remember that. So these are our front shocks. We're also going to need our shock standoffs, 2 of those. We're going to need 4 M3 lock nuts. We're also going to need M3 by 10 screws. We're going to need 2 M3 by 16 flathead screws and M3 by 18 button head screws. That we're going to need looks like these little inserts that we're going to attach the bottom of the shocks to. So we're going to need the 1 RLFR and 1 RRFL. So what we can do first is we can install the front right one, which is going to be the FR. So it's going to install on this arm, and it looks like the initial setting is on the outer 2 holes. So it's going to be in these 2 holes. Since the screws are going to be going into aluminum, I'm going to go ahead and put some thread locker on there. So we're going to need 1 M3 by 16 flathead screw and 1 M3 by 18 screw. To take note of the orientation, it's going to install like this. And the M3 by 18 screw is going to go in the outermost hole. And the M3 by 16 is going to go in the innermost hole. And it's probably best to install the M3 by 18 screw first. So I tightened down the M3 by 16 flathead screw till I got the head almost flush, and then the M3 by 18 screw is going to sit on top of the head of the M3 by 16 screw. You can kind of see how that sits. All right. Okay, so now we can install the bottom of the shock with the M3 by 10 button head screw. We're going to add a bit of Loctite on there since it's going into aluminum. And the side with the O-ring is going to be facing the front of the vehicle. So take note of that when you install the top of the shock. Alright, so now we can install the shock standoff. The shorter end is going to go into the shock tower. We're going to be using the inside hole in the center for our initial setting. So to install this, we're going to install the shorter end through the shock tower and use the M3 lock nut on the back side and tighten it down. Now remember, the O-ring is going to be facing the front of the vehicle. You can slide on your shock. And then put the M3 lock nut on. There we go. Now I can do the same thing for the other side. Okay. Now I can go ahead and move on to the rear and do pretty much the same thing. So we're going to need our rear shocks. We're going to need 2 M3x16 flathead screws. We're going to need 2 M3x18 screws and 2 M3x10 screws, along with 4 M3 lock nuts and 2 shock standoffs, and these pieces here for the bottom shock mount. So let's start off with the right left. So the right left of the car is going to be here. This insert is going to install like so. And the initial setting for the rear insert is these 2 holes here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add some Loctite to our M3x16 flathead screw and M3x18 screw. And the M3x16 screw is going to go on the inside hole. And again, you want to install the flathead screw first and then the button head screw because they overlap, like so. Next we want to do is install the bottom of the shock. So we'll put some Loctite on the M3x10 screw. Now the same thing is going to go here. The side with the O-ring is going to be facing outward, so it's going to be facing the rear of the car. We're going to go ahead and install the shock standoff with the shorter side going into the shock tower. And the initial setting is on the inside row of holes on the center hole. So all you gotta do is slide in the shock standoff and install the M3 lock nut on the back. And all you gotta do is slide on your shock and then install your M3 lock nut. Now we can do pretty much the same thing on the other side. Okay, now that the shocks are on, we can assemble the front bumper. So I'm going to set the chassis aside for now. So we're going to need the foam bumper itself and the top and bottom brackets. Along with that, we're going to need 3 M4 by 14 flathead screws and 3 M4 lock nuts. So how this is going to install is we're going to insert this top piece. So when you install the M3 or the M4 lock nuts, there's actually a hex down in there for them to install into. So make sure that they're seating properly. And just tighten down until you feel resistance, and you'll know because it basically the lock nut is shouldering up, so you can't over tighten it. And there we go. And now we can install this carbon fiber piece with 2 M3 by 10 screws and 2 M3 lock nuts. And they're just going to install like so, using these 2 holes here and here. And the lock nuts have a little cutout for them to sit in, so you don't have to fold back up when you install. Now we're going to install the body posts. So we're going to need 2 M4 by 14 screws and 2 M3 by 10 screws, and we're also going to need 2 M3 by 6 set screws. We're going to need 2 body posts. We're going to need this piece here, along with 2 of these. We need 2 more M3 by 6 set screws and some of these body clips. So we're going to install the body post with these little ridges going into the bumper, and these 2 holes are going to be facing up. So take note of the orientation. You want those ridges to be facing the front of the vehicle. And what we're going to do is, once it's sitting down flush, we're going to go ahead and install one of the M3 by 6 set screws. And you want to make sure the set screw is sitting in one of those grooves, so that way it prevents it from moving up and down. And do the other side. Next, we're going to install this piece. It's going to be facing, the screws are going to be facing the front, and we're going to install it. I'm actually going to install the set screws first into here, just a few turns, and we're going to install it on the 3rd groove from the top. So take note of that orientation. So you can go ahead and slide it onto the posts, and then go ahead and screw down the set screw when you reach the 3rd notch in the post. Okay, next we can install these little body rests, and take note that we're going to install it in the 2nd hole from the top. So all you gotta do is slide this down and then insert this little body clip through all the holes. Now this assembly is ready to install onto the chassis itself. So we have our chassis. So the 2 screws on top, the M3 by 10, are going to install in these 2 holes, and the M4 by 14 are going to install from the bottom and these 2 holes and go into this block here. So we're going to install using Loctite since it's going into aluminum. So with that done, we can install, looks like another body post that's going to install on the front on the shock tower. So we're going to need a body post, we're going to need this mount. Along with this mount, we're going to need 2 M3 by 10 screws. We're also going to need an M3 by 6 set screw, one of these body rests, and one of these pins. So it says that we need approximately 52 millimeters, so I'm going to go ahead and measure it out. So 52 millimeters from the top of the post. The top of the post is where the 2 holes are. So measure 52 millimeters and you can go ahead and cut. Alright, so I got the post trimmed. Basically took a hacksaw, cut it off, and then just sanded it down. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to install this mount. And to install this mount, it's going to install in these 2 holes here. And this larger boss is going to go through the shock tower like so. I'm going to go ahead and install the M3 by 6 set screw. I'm just going to get it started and then install the post. And it doesn't really say where to put the post. Just want to make sure the post doesn't interfere with the differential. So mine doesn't, make sure yours doesn't as well. And lastly, you can install this body rest in the second hole. And all you gotta do is just line up the holes and insert your little body clip through the holes. There we go. Now we can move on to the rear and install the body posts back there. So for the rears, we only need 37 millimeters from the top. So I'm gonna go ahead and go cut these real quick and I'll be right back. So went ahead and got the body post trimmed. And we can go ahead and install the body rests. You're going to install in the second hole from the top. So all you got to do is line up the holes and install the pins. You can go ahead and install the posts onto this mount. So we're going to need 2 M3 set screws. I'll go ahead and get them both started. So now we can go ahead and install the posts. The posts are going to install with in the topmost notch here. So take note of that. Now we're going to need 2 M3 lock nuts and 2 M3 by 25 screws. So the way this is going to install is we're going to install the M3 lock nuts inside the mount itself. And you just got to push the lock nuts in, and you might need help with some shock pliers. Now all we got to do is put the body post mount on, and this side faces the rear. The side where the set screws go into is going to face the rear of the car. So I just line this up, and then you can install your M3 by 25 screws. And that's it. So the final assembly still includes installing the wheels and tires, the body, the wing, but I do not have those. So that's going to conclude the build for me. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and the video series. Please like and subscribe if you did. Stay tuned for the next video where I'm going to kind of wrap everything up and do like a build review video. So stay tuned for that. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks.